Hey everybody, it's Michael. I'm back again with another walkthrough video, and today I would like to show you Trambahn. Trambahn is by designer Helmut Ohley, who is usually famous for 18xx games, but also quote-unquote lighter train games such as Russian railroads. In fact, this is kind of a train game, but I'll get into that later on. This is the German version from Lookout Spiele. It is language independent, but it only has German rules inside. And I guess the English rules can be found soon online on the Mayfair page, for example, because Mayfair is putting this out in English, and I'm not sure whether it's already appeared, but it should come out sooner if it hasn't. The game, as you can see, is for 2 players because it's from Lookout Spiele's 2-player line, ages 8 and up, and it takes about 30 minutes to play. Now, what's it about? First, maybe let's talk about the title. Trambahn means streetcar in German, although it's not the normal German term, because that would be Straßenbahn. Trambahn is a more maybe, let's say, colloquial term for streetcars that is mostly used in southern Germany. It is not quite clear where the name actually comes from. There are certain theories. Some say it's because of the engineer. He had a name that sounded like tram. Some others say it's because the pieces of wood that were used to lay the tracks were called trams. It is not sure where it's called this way. But nevertheless, we're talking about a very specific Trambahn in southern Germany, the one in Munich. The players are running competing streetcar businesses, and they're basically trying to get the contract to be the one streetcar company in Munich. And although the game is fairly abstract, as you will see, the theme really comes to life thanks to the beautiful artwork of Clemens Franz, and especially since there are lots of historical illustrations. Basically, most of the drawings in the game are directly taken from postcards that depict that area, and I think this is a very nice touch. Mechanically, this is a card game. Cards are the only component. It uses multi-purpose cards, so hand management and deciding what to do with those cards, how to best use them, is one of the main challenges of the game. What I'd like to do now is show you a full game. Enjoy! Okay, I've set up the game, and as always, let's take a brief look at the components first. These are the 4 terminal stations for the 4 tramway lines that we'll have in the game, and they're numbered 1 to 4, and they're also color-coded. Over here we have the supply of trams. There are 2s, 3s and 4s. The 4s at the bottom, then the 3s, then the 2s, and we also have an offer of 3 cards. Then we have the draw pile, a scoring pad, and finally the possessions of the 2 players. I've once again used the marker from another game to be able to distinguish them. The red player is the second player, so he starts with 15 face down cards. That is his money, he can't look at the back side, this is just used as money, and 6 cards in his hand. Over here we have a reference card, and then blue will be the starting player, so he only has 12,000 marks in his bank, and he also has 6 cards. And then we can already start the game. So let's actually take a look at the blue player's cards. He has a blue 3 and 8, a green 7 and 8, and a yellow 7 and a red 8. On your turn, you first have to place 1 or 2 cards as passengers, and this is not optional, you have to do that. And the thing is, you will preferably use those cards to build routes in the different colors in your own tableau. And for that you need as many different cards as possible, and you have to play them in ascending order. So actually the 3 and the 8 is not so good, because it would be nice if we had more cards that could go in between. On the other hand, to actually score a route in a certain color, there have to be enough passengers at the terminal stations. So preferably you would also play your cards here, and then that's a bit of a dilemma, because if you play any cards to the terminal stations to make sure that the routes in the certain colors are actually scored, then you don't have enough cards to put them in the routes. Okay, so what we'll actually do is we'll start a new route with a 3 in the next step, so we can place the 8 as a passenger at the station, because then we satisfy the first thing we have to do, because we're playing 1 card as a passenger. So this card goes up here, it's a blue one, so it goes to the blue line, and as soon as there are 4 passengers waiting, then blue will be scored for both players. Then we can place any number of cards as stations in front of us. So we'll start a new route with a blue station, the 3. Now we can extend this from the 4 onwards to the 10. However, now that we decided to start with 3, we can't put a 1 or 2 here in the future. Now we could of course do a green route with a 7 or the 8, but that's not as interesting because we want to get the cards lower than that. So this is all we do in this step. Then we can place any number of cards as money on our money pile. we choose to discard those. First of all, we have more money this way, and second, we get to draw more cards because we'll always refill our hand to 6. So now we add 14 money, which is good because now in step number 4 we could purchase trains. It's optional, but of course we want to. The thing is, for every route that we started, and we currently have 1, we need a train, otherwise the card will be discarded later on. On the other hand, we can't purchase trains for routes that we haven't started yet, so all we can do now actually is buy 1 train. And the only ones available are the 2 trains, and they cost 5,000 each, so we take one of those, put it on top of our blue route, and we have to pay 5,000 marks. And these are just put onto a discard pile. And in the last step, we would discard any cards without a train, or rather we would make them into money so they're not lost, but it would not be very fortunate anyway. And then we draw up until we have a hand of 6. So we draw 4 cards. And let's see what we get. We got a blue 6, that is good. We got another green 8, not so good, but we can use it as a passenger, or even in a second route. Then we got a yellow 8 and a joker, or basically a conductor, which serves a joker, a wild. And those don't actually replace any numbers in a route, but they can help bring that route to 8 cards, because then you can do a so-called bonus tour. Then, of course, we replace the offer. And so that was blue's first turn, and we move over to red. Red puts 1 card, a red 1, as a passenger, and then he decides to actually start 3 different routes with a green 2, a blue 4, and a yellow 3. Then he decides to not put any cards down as money. And now the red has discarded all his 15,000. Of course he can buy 3 number 2 trains. So now the first 3 train comes out. It costs 10 instead of 5. And as we can see, we are no longer talking about horse-drawn tramways, but steam-powered ones. And so each of those lines now has a tram. And we'll see in a minute when we have our first scoring what the numbers actually do. Red has 2 cards left, so he draws 4. Blue decides to use this green card as a passenger. He's of course helping the red player because he already has a green route, but blue is hoping that before long he'll also be able to build one. Then he decides to play the 6, that's fine because the order is still ascending. And he also decides to play a joker, and you can always put them at the beginning because all they do is increase the number of cards, and we want to hit 8 cards because then we can do a bonus scoring. Then we decide to keep the 7 and the 8. This one becomes money, so we draw 4 more cards. Red plays a yellow card as a passenger, and then he plays a 4 and a 5 as stations in the yellow route. He decides to keep the cards, not convert any into money, so he draws 3. Blue is looking at his cards and he sees that he probably has to change his tactics a little bit. Waiting around for the green ones is probably not a good idea any longer, so he decides to actually use the 7 as a passenger. Then he starts a new route with the red cards. He decides to turn the green one into money. Now he has to buy a new train, and he can either buy 1 for 5 or 1 for 10. And of course the 10 ones are better. Yes, I know, I still haven't told you exactly why. And since he can afford it, he decides to take this one. So it's put over here. And by the way, once trams are associated with routes, they can no longer be moved around. So we have to pay 10. And then we get to draw 4. Red puts 2 yellow cards down as passengers, so 1 more card and yellow will score, which is of course good for him and bad for blue. And then he decides not to play any new cards as stations. He puts 1 card over as money, and so he draws 3 new ones. Looking at his cards, blue has a bit of a problem. He has drawn very nice yellow cards, but he can't afford to actually get a train for them, so it would be a better idea to put them out. He has a red 6 and a joker, which would of course be very nice, but the problem is he has to use at least one of them as a passenger. So he actually decides to use the joker as a red passenger, puts 6 over here. These cards are really, really nice and would be a pity to give them up. So he decides to only draw 2 cards and not make any of his current cards into money. Red plays a yellow card. Now, since we have 4 passengers waiting for the yellow line, we'll actually have a tour or run of that line. So these 4 are discarded. And now each player, and only the red player has a yellow line, will add up the victory points on all the yellow lines and multiply them by the train. So yellow will get 3 times 2, 6 points. Then on the scoring pad we have 1 row for the first run. So we can enter 0 points for blue and 6 points for red. And the game will actually be over once we have done 10 runs. Then red's turn continues. He doesn't have any cards he would like to play as stations. However, he would like to turn 2 cards into money. And then his turn is over and he'll draw 3 more cards. The blue player has a bit of a problem. If he has to play 1 card as a passenger each turn and he wants to keep those 4, then he has only 1 card per turn that he can recycle for money, and it might take a while to get somewhere in this fashion. On the other hand, he has 1, and there is 2 train available that only costs 5. So he decides to continue with this pattern. Now he has a choice to make. Of course he wants to use the conductor as a wild in one of his lines, but then he would have to put the 3 up here as a passenger, which would mean that the green line is almost about to score, and of course that would benefit his opponent, but only with 2 points. So he decides to use the wild card as a red passenger up here, because if red scores, that'll benefit him. Then he keeps on to those 4 cards, doesn't play anything here, and the 3 is converted into money, and he draws 2. Red plays a blue card up here, and then 1 conductor into his yellow route, and he decides not to convert any cards into money, so he draws 2. If he doesn't want to break up these yellow cards, blue doesn't have a chance. He needs to use a green card up here. Then he could play the red card. Of course, from 6 to 9 would be a bit of a jump. On the other hand, he somehow has to get through his cards, so he decides to play it. And then he draws 2. Red plays the 4th green card, so we trigger scoring. These are discarded. Red will get 2 points. Blue will get nothing. Then red plays a blue 6 and draws 2 cards. Blue again has a joker, and the thing is, if he uses it, he could trigger red, which would be great for him, of course. But the thing is, he's not in a particular hurry to score red, so he decides to use the 4 up here. This is without danger at the moment, and put the joker with red route. And then he draws 2. Red plays a yellow card up here, then a blue 8 and a blue 9 into this route. He decides to turn 1 card into money, so he's now at 4. And then he draws 4 cards. Blue got lucky because he got 2 red cards. The thing is, he can't play the 8 into this one. He would very much like to play the 10. If he uses the 8 to trigger a scoring, then he wouldn't score the 3 points for the 10. So what he actually does is he decides to break up the yellow cards now. So he uses this one up here. Then he plays the 10 in here. He could turn the 8 into money, but he decides to keep it around to trigger a scoring next round. So he draws 2 cards. Red plays a blue passenger. He doesn't play any stations, but he decides to turn 2 cards into money, and then he has enough to buy a 2 train, but he doesn't have any open routes, so he actually can't do that right now. So he simply draws 3 cards. Blue decides to use the 8 to trigger a scoring. He has 1, 2, 3, 5, 8 points, times 3 is 24. Red has nothing. Then he can't play anything, or rather he doesn't want to, and he decides to convert both the 2 and the 5 into money, so he's almost there, and he draws 3 new cards. Red plays a yellow 5, and since you're allowed to play up to 2 cards as passengers, also a blue 3, triggering the blue scoring. He will get 6 times 2, 12 points, while blue will only get 4. Then he actually plays a single 6 as the start of a new route, because then in the next step he can actually claim the remaining 2 train, which costs him 5. And then afterwards we refill the offer. So now they all cost 10, and then he draws 3 cards. Blue decides to press the advantage on red, so he uses both red cards as passengers. He plays the 8 over here. He still decides to keep these cards around. I mean, he could convert them all to money, but then he would need to get better cards again. So he simply draws 3. Red plays a blue card as a passenger and converts 1 card into money, so he draws 2. Blue got lucky, he got another 2 red cards, so he decides to play both of them. To trigger red scoring, of course, he could try to build another route with them and then double down on red scorings, but for that he needs money, and he decides that playing fast is probably the better idea now. So these are discarded. He once again gets 24 points. So we're halfway through the game, because we have 5 of 10 scorings. Then the 1 can be converted into money, and he draws 3. Red plays a green card up here, a blue card over here, and then it's already done, so he draws 2 cards. Blue has these 3 new cards, so the 4 can be used up here. Then he decides to play the 10 and uses 6 as money. So he's now at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He draws 3 new cards. Red decides to play a red card, not very good for him. Converts 1 card into money and draws 2 new ones. Blue plays a blue card, so we're almost to a scoring. He has yet another conductor, so he decides to play it with the red line. Which is now at 7 cards, so 1 more card, which has to be a conductor, and then we'll get a bonus scoring. And then he draws 2. Red plays a yellow card, so we score. He gets 6 points. Then he decides to play the 8 and the 9 in yellow and convert 1 card into money, so he draws 4 new ones. Blue uses this card as a passenger, turns this one into money, draws 2. Red plays a green card and a blue card, so we'll score. Blue gets 1, 2, 4, 7 times 2 is 14. And red over here has 3 times 2 is 6. Plus 6 times 2, 12 for a total of 18. Then the thing is, once the pile runs out, each player has to lose half their money, and red player knows, of course, that the blue player is saving money. So the thing is, if he converts cards into money now, then he'll lose more later on, but he doesn't really need another train right now. So by converting more cards into money, for example these 2, the deck will run out quicker, and so blue will have to discard half his money before he can actually make a purchase. Red draws 4. Blue first of all has to use a card as a passenger. He decides to take this one. He got lucky, he got another conductor, so he puts it in here. And now there are 8 cards in this route, so this one and only this one will get a bonus scoring, so that's once more 24 points. And we have this line Sonderfahrt, which translates as bonus 2 down here, so we can note the 24 points in here. He has 7 money. He could of course play only 1 card, the 2 for example, convert the other 3 cards into money, and then buy a 3 train to avoid losing money. On the other hand, if he doesn't do anything right now, then he'll lose 3 of those 7 money, but he'll still keep these cards around. He decides to do the latter because he thinks he's in the lead and he can afford it, so he won't convert anything. He draws the last 2 cards, so we have to reshuffle and everybody will lose half their money. Round it down, so in his case it's 3, and for the red player he has 6, so he also loses 3. Red plays a blue passenger, then he has a yellow 10. Unfortunately, it's only the 7th card, so we won't have a bonus scoring. And then over here, for his green route, he plays a 6, 7, and 10. And then he draws 5 cards. Blue plays a red card, turns 1 card into money, draws 2. Red plays a green card, so we get a scoring. He has 7 points, times 2, that's 14. And then he converts 2, and draws 3. Blue plays a red card, so we get another scoring. He once again gets his 24 points. He doesn't play anything, but converts 1 card into money. Red plays a blue card, converts 1 card into money. Blue plays a red card, converts 1 card into money. Red plays a yellow card, converts 1 card into money. Blue plays a red card, converts 1 card into money. Red plays a yellow card, converts one card into money. Blue plays a red card, converts one card into money, he's now at 9. Red plays a blue card, thus ending the game because we have one more scoring. Blue gets 14 points, red gets 18. So that's the end of the game because we have done 10 scorings or runs. So all that remains is sum up the scores. And then the final scores are 128 for blue and 76 for red, making blue the overall winner. And that was one full game of Trambahn. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this overview of Trambahn. First of all, sorry about that rules mistake. To stress it once again, once a route is finished, that is, it has a 10 in it, you can't add any conductors to it. That of course increases the tension in the decisions, because if you want to get that bonus scoring, then you have to wait until the 10 would be the 8th card, for example. Apart from that mistake, and maybe the fact that at least one of the players didn't play very well, I hope you got a very good overview of how the game plays. The rules are very simple, but there's of course multiple ways to victory. You can simply focus on one color and try to make many valuable routes in that color and try to rush it in the scoring. You can try to build many routes of different colors, so whatever color is scored and whatever cards you get, you'll at least get some points, and many other strategies in between. Since it's a card game, of course you're subject to a little bit of luck of the draw, but on the other hand, since the cards are multi-purpose, you can still do something with your cards anyway, and the game is also rather short, so in the long term the luck shouldn't matter that much. The decisions are interesting. The main thing is, of course, if you have a card of a certain color, do you want to use it in a route or do you want to use it in the scoring? You basically need both, because if you score and you don't have any routes, it doesn't matter. And if you have good routes but you can't score them, once again, it doesn't matter. So of course you have to find a balance here. And since you can only play in ascending order, sometimes you have to make hard decisions. Getting a route to 8 cards is of course very valuable because of bonus scoring, but it's also rather difficult, and so is the jockeying for the trams. The 5 ones are no problem, you have enough money to buy one of those, but a 10 or maybe even a 15 that you haven't seen in the game are quite hard to get because you have to save your money for them. And I guess that's already it. So once again, thanks for watching, have fun playing, and until next time. Bye bye.